Let's have a quick video lesson looking at something called the Protestant Reformation. You'll see how it's connected both with the Medici and the Renaissance and also with printing, how that helps spread some of the ideas. So what will you learn in this lesson? You'll see how Medici power and patronage continues even after the fall from power of Lorenzo and the Medici in Florence. It continues because Lorenzo's son, Giovanni, actually becomes Pope Leo X. You'll see some of the consequences of printing and how these, again, as we see, help to spread new ideas. Very important. And you'll learn what the Reformation was, why it was important, and why it happened. So let's quickly remind ourselves about the decline of Medici power in Florence. If you remember, under Lorenzo, in the second half of his life, the Medici banks began to fail. They could not do so many favours anymore, so they lost friends. They couldn't afford to patronise, help people out as much as they used to. The power of the Medici declined, and in fact, after Lorenzo's death, his son was actually exiled from Florence. So the Medici fell from power. If you remember, Savonarola, the monk, the extremist monk Savonarola, was part of that. He criticised Lorenzo and his humanism. But nonetheless, Lorenzo's son, Giovanni, had been made cardinal, and as you will see, he actually became pope. So in some ways decline, but they also achieve a lot of power in terms of Giovanni actually becoming pope, head of the Catholic Church, which was a dominant power in Europe. Let's just have a look at some of Savonarola's words, just to remind ourselves of how he was really quite extreme. So what did he say? He said it would be good for religion if many books that seem useful were destroyed. So again, he's kind of against people exploring many different ideas. He thinks only some ideas should be allowed. Some are essentially, he thinks, evil. Let's move on. The only good thing that we owe to Plato and Aristotle is that they brought forward many arguments which we can use against the heretics, yet they and other philosophers are now in hell. You can see that Savonarola was definitely against something that Lorenzo loved, which was humanism. Remember, part of humanism is looking back to the ideas of ancient Greece and Rome and those philosophers. Well, Savonarola does not agree with that. He thinks those ancient philosophers are in hell. And hell, we'll see, comes up in this as well. So printing press, let's remind ourselves of the importance of the invention and its consequences. So before that, books were mainly made by hand. Printing did come into Europe. The technology had first been invented in Asia, probably in China, and that was woodblock printing. Again, much better than writing out by hand, quicker, but the invention, the refinement of printing that Johannes Gutenberg did was movable metal type. Again, so you could create new books much more quickly. You didn't need skilled carvers. So books became much cheaper. You could produce more, and it helped to spread ideas. Let's remind ourselves of that again. So no more monks copying things out by hand. Again, so the church loses some power here, because before all books were essentially made by the church, by monks in the church. So you now have printed books with movable type. That means books are now cheaper. Many, many more books are now printed, some of which are not on religious themes. They're on other themes, whether they be scientific or other ideas. And really, kind of like when YouTube videos go viral, in fact, really very, very, very similar, is ideas can now go viral. Ideas can spread. People can pick up on them. They tell their friends. Books are cheaper. People buy the books. They tell their friends. So ideas can kind of go viral with printing. Let's remind ourselves a little bit about the Medici as patrons. So there's a picture of Lorenzo de' Medici. Well, his son, Giovanni, he managed to get his son to become a cardinal. A cardinal is a very important person in the church. So there his son, a bit older, as a cardinal. And that cardinal, Giovanni de' Medici, the son of Lorenzo, would actually go on to become... I think we've gone on one. Let's go back one. Oh, no, we haven't. His son would actually go on to become, sorry about this, guys, just give me a minute. So there's the baby Giovanni. There's Giovanni as cardinal. And the next one, hopefully, here we go. So under Giovanni, who then became Pope Leo X, Medici patronage continued. Here is a statue made by Michelangelo called the Madonna and Child. And again, that was commissioned by Pope Leo X. So hopefully moving on. Later on, actually, you're probably very familiar with this. This is a very famous picture painted by Michelangelo in the Sistine Chapel. Actually, this one wasn't painted for the Medici, actually. This was for a later pope called Julius II. But you can see that, again, this whole idea of patronage. Artists work for patrons. So let's move on past the Sistine Chapel. So Giovanni, as we remembered, became Pope Leo X. So a Medici is now Pope in a very important position. Thing is, Pope Leo X, like popes before him actually, he spent a lot of money. Well, what did he spend his money on? He liked parties. He liked to have great, big, expensive parties with hundreds of guests and exotic foods and performances. This cost money. He also built some palaces that he would live in, but he also spent money on building churches and things as well. So, partly for himself, partly for the church, improving the church. And he did spend a lot of money acquiring books for the Vatican Library. So we can kind of criticize Pope Leo for spending money on himself, but he also did spend money on the church. But he spent so much money that basically he ran out of money. And he needed some money. So what did Pope Leo X turn to? Well, something was already happening called the sale of indulgences. So let's look at this lady on the left. Imagine she is a Renaissance peasant living in Italy or Germany or England, somewhere in Europe. And obviously, when she dies, she does not want to go to the awful picture at the bottom. She doesn't want to go to hell. She wants her soul to go to heaven. And again, with people that she dies, maybe if her father dies or her husband dies or one of her children dies even. She doesn't want them to go to hell. She wants them to go to heaven. And she'll do what she can to make sure that they go to heaven. So what happened? Agents of the Pope, you can see this guy on the right, here he is supposed to be a monk or an agent of the Pope. They would basically kind of sell forgiveness for money. That would help your soul after you die, or your relatives' souls, if you want to help them, go to heaven. So basically, your peasant or your person, or even your rich person, they would give money to the agent of the Pope, who would then give them a piece of paper called an indulgence, which basically meant your sins are forgiven. So after you die, your soul, or maybe if you're paying for an indulgence for your father or your mother or your brother or your daughter that's just died, you'll help their soul get to heaven quickly. So you can see why people want to do it, and also it brings in money for the church, which needs the money. Now, there's this guy in Germany. He's a German monk, and he's called Martin Luther. He disagrees with this. He says the church cannot sell forgiveness. People cannot buy forgiveness with money. He says we are saved by faith alone. So he has essentially a different idea, and he criticizes the church for selling indulgences. He has this idea in 1417. What century is that, guys? 1417? I hope you said 15th. So in this church at Wittenberg, he nails his ideas. They're called the 95 Theses. And again, one of the big ideas in this was you should not buy forgiveness. People should ask directly to God for forgiveness. Now, let's look at our old friend, the printing press. This becomes important here because of the printing press, books are published containing Martin Luther's idea. His friends pay for those books to be published. These books spread around. So Martin Luther's ideas, criticizing the Pope for selling indulgences and other things, these ideas spread around. How they spread, why they spread so quickly, because of printing and printed books. This led to something called the Reformation, the split in the church. The church then split. Before, where you had one church in Europe, the Catholic Church, you now had a church split. So Pope Leo X didn't like this. He called Martin Luther a heretic, which is somebody who teaches against the church. When Martin Luther didn't change his mind and say he was wrong, he excommunicated Martin Luther. Now, this could make people afraid because maybe they wouldn't go to heaven, but Martin Luther said no, he was going to stick with his ideas, and actually a lot of people started to follow him in certain areas in Germany and in other parts of Europe. So before, where you had one Catholic church, you now had a split between the Catholic Church and new churches called Protestant churches. And let's finish today by having a look at the consequences in the world today. If we have a look at this map of world religions today, you can see that different religions are kind of popular in different areas. If you look at the dark green, you can see North Africa, Saudi Arabia, Western and Central Asia is largely Muslim. Also, if you look over at Asia, you can see Indonesia, again, is largely Muslim. And you can see that Russia is mostly there. They are something called the Orthodox Church. Again, that's a bit different. See where Thailand is there? Then you've got Buddhism. That's the kind of light orange colour. Now, can you see where the Catholics are? So where before you would have a lot more yellow is Catholicism, you can see that Italy, if you look at Europe, Italy, Spain, France, they're Catholic. But England and Northern Europe and North America, they're mostly Protestant. So this split actually has had an effect right up to the world.